Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing awesome out there this morning and having a fantastic start to your Monday and week out there. I know it's Monday. I know that's probably not most people's favorite day of the week. But regardless, I hope you guys are making the best out of it and having a fantastic start to it. Got you some updated information on what's going to happen weather-wise for your Monday. We'll get detailed with you guys, just like we always do. Talk about what's driving these weather features for today. There is a chance of strong to severe storms, and we're going to talk about those specific areas in great detail. And then we'll talk about the rest of the lower 48 too, and try to figure out what's going to happen for your next 24 hours. After we get done doing that, we will discuss updated information on the severe weather risk ahead of us, talking about Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and speak on any changes from the last couple videos that we made yesterday. And then we'll give you an update on the tropics. We'll continue to feed you guys those updates from the tropics, and there is some things that we need to discuss, just like there has been over the last 7 or 8 days. Florida is going to be a highlighted state this week, getting all the way into this weekend for flash flooding, where sections of like southwest Florida, like Fort Myers, for example, could get as much as 20 inches of rain per the National Weather Service. So we're going to try to figure that one out for you folks. Is anything going to develop? We're continuing to watch the risk of that. So we'll discuss that in great detail. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. As always, on a Sunday, I'm very behind on comments as I don't really give it an opportunity to answer them over the weekend. So I will get to them later on this afternoon when I get a little break at work, called up, and get all caught up with that. If you guys got anything that I can pray about, or anybody else could pray about, or all of us could pray about, please put those in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So, as far as what's going on right now, a big clearing over the Great Lakes region, the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, a little bit of a trough. I wouldn't say a little bit. It's a pretty big trough in place. And embedded in this trough, you got a broad area of low pressure spinning around up here in areas of Canada. This is continuing just to bring a feed of shower activity into the interior Northeast. There is a boundary at the southern flank of this trough, a cold front boundary, and this is actually bringing some dry air. A nice morning across the Apps. For example, even northern North Carolina seeing some dry air this morning. But once you get along that boundary and just south, you're dealing with a lot of shower and storm activity. For example, I woke up about 5:30, which is late for me, and I was woken up to some flashes of lightning, some thunder, some heavy rain. It's always a cool thing to wake up to, in my opinion, when it isn't too crazy or severe or anything like that. But always a warm greeting, at least in my opinion. But you're dealing with that in the eastern sections of South Carolina, especially waking up to some storms. And if you notice right in here, it's almost like a direct cutoff of kind of some moisture into here, and then, like nothing into here. That is your boundary, separating, dry air, limiting any kind of shower and storm development. And then south of that, you got plenty of moist air. So that'll be a driving force today, and we'll speak on that, especially for Georgia and the low country of South Carolina. You're starting to get some moisture showing up, from the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. We'll speak heavily on that. And then we have a lot of activity dancing around here in New Mexico and Texas. It's raining pretty good in New Mexico, especially the northern half of the state. And then we got a complex of storms heading southeast, cruising down in the southern half of Texas this morning. Then we got some rain hanging out up here with a trough in place up into Canada, swinging in some moisture across the northern Rockies, and eventually we'll fire up that line of storms in the northern plains for today and all that stuff. And we will get detailed on that line of storms for the northern plains. So watch as mornings and advisories, some dense fog just north of that boundary, which is typical kind of stuff. Typically when very moist air meets drier air, you get fog. And that is the case right in here across Tennessee, southern southern Kentucky, and areas of the southern and central Apps. You're dealing with some fog this morning. Excessive heat warnings continue for the southwest, heat advisories and excessive heat warnings for the valley of California, Sacramento, for example, heat advisories. Rest of the country, a couple flood watches scattered about out there, but other than that, pretty quiet. Excessive rainfall outlook. One thing that'll change from this in the coming days is Florida, no doubt about it. Just a marginal risk of flash flooding today. That will change dramatically once you get into the next few days. But a marginal risk here in the Dakotas and then areas of the southern plains and southern high plains. So means at least just a 5% chance of flash flood guidance being exceeded within 25 miles in a given location. As far as the Storm Prediction Center outlook, there's an area right up here to watch. Level 2 out of 5, a slight risk. Marginal risk extending from the Canadian-U.S. border all the way to the U.S.-Mexico border. And this entire area could run the risk of strong and severe storms, but a higher risk right here in the northern plains, areas of Wyoming, the western sections of South Dakota and Nebraska. And then you got a slight risk down here too. This could get bumped up a little bit to Charleston in the later updates, but a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 for now for Savannah. That's new. And guys, I do think if you live down here and you're tuning in, you could get some big time storms later this afternoon that could really reform with the daytime heating that really gets going down here. Marginal risk extending from southern Mississippi all the way to almost Myrtle Beach. So risk of thunderstorms, some that could be strong and severe for sure. What's this driven off of? Well, what's interesting to me is there's a little baby 2% risk of a tornado down here in the low country of South Carolina, the coastal sections of southeastern Georgia. So they're mentioning the fact that some of this convection could interact with a coastal boundary that happens in the summer, especially once you get into June onward. A boundary, typically we call it a sea breeze, pops off the ocean and works its way inland. These storms could interact with that, create a micro spin in the atmosphere, and sometimes pop off a tornado. 2% risk of a tornado in the high plains too, northern plains. And then the wind threat, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour here and down here. And then the hail threat, listen, there's a risk of some larger hail down here also. So kind of a miniature all-hazard slight risk, even for the southeast today. This is something we need to watch down here. If I had a day off, I would head on down to the low country and chase this little event. But it's Monday. Can't just call out because of storms all the time. My boss is very lenient with that kind of stuff, very supportive of my passion. I'm very blessed with that, but can't do that on the Monday to my boys at work. But slight risk here. So there's a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. Let's go on and zoom into the southeast. Okay, this morning you're dealing with the shower and storm activity. HRRR model not handling it that well, but doing the best it can, I guess. But we get into about midday. We notice the redevelopment of showers and storms kind of west of Augusta here in eastern Georgia. You notice there's kind of two main things going on. Storms developing up here, and then we got a lot of tropical downpours dancing around here in the southern tip of Florida. This is kind of day one of a very active stretch of weather for the southern half of Florida. Look at all these storms, numerous storms ongoing across Georgia. I mean, even almost all the way up to Columbia. But Orangeburg Point south, I mean, you got a lot of storm activity. These will make it all the way to the coastal regions of South Carolina and Georgia. I don't want to ignore the fact that there is a shot of strong to severe storms even in southern Alabama, southern Georgia for sure. Look at this little supercell feature off the coast, the east coast of Florida. So that's something interesting to watch. And then just some scattered downpours and storms across the southern half of Louisiana, very possible. And we kind of keep this going right. And, you know, we could get breaks in the showers and storms in the southern half of Florida. Could get some storms way up here, a little bit further up the coast in Florida. But you notice we get into this evening, scattered storms. If you live in the southern half of the Gulf states, definitely likely. And then once we start to get tonight into tomorrow morning, heavy, widespread, heavy tropical downpours really begins to take over the southern half of the peninsula of Florida. But just a closer look at all this here. And bang, look at those storms that form. I mean, as early as, what time is this? This is around 3 p.m. Storms begin to fire. And guys, I mean, big time daytime heating rises up into here. Drier air up here once you get into upstate South Carolina, Piedmont, North Carolina, northern Georgia potentially. But, you know, where the heat and humidity can really get going. These storms will be intense. Orangeburg Point south to Savannah, Charleston. I mean, back to Macon, Georgia. Anybody in southeast Georgia, there is a small tornado risk with this too. But these storms will head, you know, really hit the coastline pretty good. Charleston, down to Beaufort, Edisto Island, Savannah, big storms. And then by the time you get to about 8 p.m., things start to die off. But, you know, you could still be dealing with some storms down here near like Tybee Island, for example. These could make it all the way to the Jacksonville area. It's very possible for that. And, you know, we look at the updraft velocity swath between now and the next 18 hours. And it does indicate some rotation. And it really likes this little boundary right in here in southern South Carolina. But you see where there could be some spin-ups with these storms. and these storms could definitely produce some damaging winds too. So a little bit further south, I mean, throughout the afternoon, the evening, nothing too crazy, scattered downpours. What really intrigues me is what happens as we start to get into the overnight hours. Look at how these heavy downpours, these storms, very, very heavy rain. I mean, these storms will unload, loaded air mass, saturated air mass will just unload a ton of rain onto southwestern Florida, really starting tonight. I mean, this is like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, starts to really take over, and then it takes us all the way into tomorrow morning. And just you're waking up tomorrow morning from Orlando Point south to just a ton of rainfall, for sure for this area. So, I mean, this is adding up fast. Look at all this rain you're getting in Tampa Bay as you're waking up tomorrow, Clearwater. And just between now and the next 24 hours, just between now and tomorrow morning, already calling for 2.5 inches of rain around the Fort Myers area, points, north and south. Okay. So a lot. I mean, could get 1/2 inch to 1 inch in Miami. Orlando, maybe up to 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So the Northeast today, we're going to talk more about Florida towards the back half of the video. Take advantage of those timestamps if you want to know more. I got them all up for you. But this morning in the Northeast, just some pesky showers you're dealing with. Just continues just to deal with just the on and off rain showers. But I do think this will be more so up here in Maine today, but cannot rule out some sprinkles, some light rain all the way as far south as like Northeast PA. But just scattered downpours across Maine this afternoon, maybe a thunderstorm, small hail, very possible. And then as we're starting to get into later this evening, we could get an area of shower activity that gets going along the Delmarva, the coastal regions, intercoastal regions of like Maryland, very possible, around DC, areas of northern VA. Could get some rain that dances around down here and then heads on off by the time we get into daybreak for our Tuesday. So don't be surprised if you go to sleep with a dry ground down here and wake up with a wet one in the Delmarva. The south central U.S., numerous showers and storms will get going. Once again, potentially in New Mexico, even into the Rockies of Colorado. But Amarillo, the panhandle of Texas, will certainly be dealing with a lot of shower and storm activity, some that really could reach severe limits. And just with the intense heating in Texas, with a little bit of flow aloft, you will certainly get some showers and storms possibly forming in like central Texas, really anywhere in Texas, all the way down to Brownsville, Texas. I mean, you guys could get some storms very possible down here. And these could get to severe limits. But you got to watch out for this cluster of storms that develops. Could get a slight risk issued down here in Texas for this cluster of storms if the models are modeling this right. Definitely could get this. Watch out, Lubbock down to Abilene. Certainly could get a cluster of storms that forms. That doesn't last too long. Kind of begins to weaken, but it could still be going on and carrying on after midnight. Could actually develop an off maybe an outflow boundary around the Dallas-Fort Worth area after midnight tonight. But I think by the time I wake up tomorrow morning, you might be just about done with it. So definitely watch these storms and just a closer look at that cluster of storms that develops. All these little pop-ups over here are very possible, so be aware of that. Dallas-Fort Worth area points west down to, Austin, San Antonio, San Angelo. Just watch out for this cluster of storms that could develop here in west central Texas. Could make it all the way to Abilene, no L, Abilene, at least in the first part of it. But this could stretch all the way to San Angelo, very possible. So be aware of those storms later on tonight in this area of west central to central Texas. So we get up to the north central U.S., most of the Great Lakes region being affected by troughing, drier air. Nice day, cooler day though, definitely a cooler day, more like spring than summer. So the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, pretty relaxed weather. But you see what's happening out west. Storms cruising through the western Dakotas, western Nebraska, out of Wyoming and Montana. But once we start to get into about 9-10 p.m., these begin to weaken just as some rainfall. So by the time they're in the eastern sections of the Dakotas, central Nebraska, I think they're pretty much weakened into just some shower activity. I think they just encounter some drier air. But we are going to be dealing with some showers and maybe some moderate to heavy rain across the northern half of Minnesota to the wee hours of the morning, and just waking up to some rainfall, maybe, across, getting into the Duluth area, Minneapolis tomorrow morning, all the way down to central Iowa, northeastern Minnesota. But a closer look at my friends here in the northern plains. Energy will shoot out of the northern Rockies. And I mean, this is around 2 p.m. Some storms possible down here near Cheyenne, up here near the northeastern sections of Wyoming. Some storms could form right before they leave the state of Montana. But this really develops into a line of storms, very quick moving line of storms. Just enough low-level moisture feeds into this to get these storms going. But some storms, I mean, this is around 3 p.m., 4 p.m. Some storms blasting through the western half of the Dakotas. Storms down here in western Nebraska could get going here in northern and northeastern of Colorado also. And they could be intense for a period throughout the late afternoon, early evening, all the way into, around dinner time. And then by the time, like I said, you get into after midnight, I think they start to kind of weaken and lose some steam for sure. So just be aware of this. You look at, let's look at this, the wind gust swath right into here. We kind of move this forward. And definitely some damaging winds are possible right in here with these clusters of storms where there is that 15% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. We could get some 40, 50, 60 mile per hour wind gusts across the northern plains for sure. So definitely be aware of that. What's the biggest threat? Well, I mean, there is a tornado risk, but I would say damaging winds is the biggest threat with this. The rest of the western U.S., I think it'll be a quieter day compared to yesterday for sure. I think, Karen, I think I read a comment from yours when I was just kind of breezing through the comments. I think you said you got hit hard yesterday with a lot of shower and storm activity. I think you did. But today, a little bit quieter. Some showers could ride through northern Montana. The rest of the immediate western U.S., maybe some isolated showers across Nevada. But other than that, guys, it's pretty chill, pretty quiet out there. Not a whole lot going on today, quiet weather. So enjoy your Monday temperatures. You see the trough in place. This is introducing some cooler weather, 60s and 70s across, the Ohio Valley. Maybe just stuck in the 50s in the UP of Michigan. The interior sections of New England, the Northeast, only like some areas won't get out the 40s in the Adirondacks, Green and White Mountains, Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, even a nice day, a cooler day, but a nice day, or spring-like across southern New England, temperatures only in the 60s and 70s. So definitely a cooler day with just a trough overhead, just allowing for cooler temperatures, lower pressure. Get a little bit further south, you get into the 70s and 80s down here, but it's more of a dry heat, so very pleasant. But once you get into southern sections of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, low country of South Carolina, point south, hot, humid, miserable weather, and just very uncomfortable. But it's just pretty much every day of the summer across the South, so ain't much different there. But the high plains will rise, well into the upper 80s, 90s, all the way up into, South Dakota, for example. A little bit of cooler air up here in North Dakota, but still, very warm into the Nebraska, Dakotas area, pretty warm up to Montana. And we're starting to warm back up out here in the Southwest where we are certainly starting to get into the 100s again, but nothing too crazy today. But you could get a more isolated area of stronger heat or higher heat up here in the northern valley of California and northern California. So as far as, that's kind of weird. All right, here we go. As far as the Storm Prediction Center outlook for tomorrow, moving past the day, they did issue a marginal risk. They bumped it up from a general risk to a marginal risk for our friends up here in the upper Midwest, Minneapolis included, almost down to Des Moines, almost up to Duluth, level 1 out of 5. And then we got a marginal risk down here in the southern plains, southern high plains, Texas, New Mexico, southern sections of Colorado, a very small section of the western panhandle of Oklahoma. But if you look right here, you see how you have this weird little bowl gap right here? That is our trough in place, kind of spinning around. So this is really cutting off the low-level moisture feed for storm development. So it's pretty cool how you can actually see it on the Storm Prediction Center Outlook map here, I think. So, but there is a risk of thunderstorms here. Not a big deal, not a big day. It's really when we get into day 3, which is for our Wednesday in this area. Okay, that day 4 is when to day 3, so we actually have an outlook now. Right now, just a slight risk. Level 2 out of 5 of severe weather. Sioux Falls, Minneapolis, just south of Duluth. Rochester, Minnesota, level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather. Marginal risk extending all the way up into International Falls, all the way back to Marquette, Green Bay, down to Des Moines, Omaha, Lincoln, all the way into northern sections of Kansas. Okay, what is this driven off of? Well, all we know is in the yellow, there's a 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles in any given location. In the black outline region, though, there's a 10% risk of significant severe weather. What's that going to be? Well, we're not sure yet, but they did mention in the Storm Prediction Center discussion that hail will be a big concern with this. So you're probably going to have a chance of significant hail with this. I would venture to say with this. So I think that we will get a hatched risk of hail, but there is going to be probably a tornado risk and a damaging wind risk, no doubt. I think as of now, they'll probably just put it as a 2% risk of a tornado, but could be a 5%. Could be a 5%. Wouldn't be surprised. And, then we start to get into that's kind of weird. When we start to get, day 4 right here. This is getting into our Thursday. Okay, we have a higher risk of severe weather for maybe some more higher populated regions like Chicago, Milwaukee, over to Detroit, now down to Springfield, now down to Kansas City, Omaha, Lincoln. Level 2 out of 5. That means there's a 15% chance of severe weather within 25 miles in a given location. What is that going to be? We're not quite sure. It's going to be kind of a similar setup, though, as a cold front will be moving through this area. That'll act as a forcing mechanism with a low to the north to get thunderstorms firing over a very moist atmosphere at the surface. So that's really what's driving that. But to discuss a little bit more on what's driving these severe weather days, and by the way, Friday, there is no 15% risk area for the Northeast. If you watched last night's video, I mentioned how I thought the Northeast could have an opportunity for some strong to severe storms for Friday. We'll talk more on that when we know a little bit more. But discussing the setup for severe weather, we got very detailed on it last night if you want to tune into that. Not much has changed, but we'll just show you the 500 millibar flow. This is flow about 18,000 feet up in the air. So these areas that you're seeing like in the more purple, almost pink colors, that's 50 knots of flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So, winds going, 55, 60 miles per hour, about 18,000 feet up. We think of this as flow aloft. This really helps to force these storms to get going. We also can look at this to find the main jet. So today, and it's hard to tell, man. I'm talking to you guys like y'all are my bros or something. I do that. Sometimes I do say that to my wife. Sometimes she just gives me a look like, I'm not a man, honey. But I work at a job there's no women that work here. At my job, it's just, 10, 11 guys. And you just get so used to just hanging out with the dudes. So if I call you guys at the audience, please excuse me for the women viewing. I'm not meaning to disrespect you. I think that's the first time I've done that, though. But anyways, back to the weather. You see this little bit of flow in New Mexico, western Texas. I mean, just a 25, 30 knots of flow here in the upper levels of the atmosphere. That is just enough to get these storms going over a very hot and moist atmosphere. So that's plenty enough to get going. Now you go up here, you're lacking a little bit more of those thermodynamics, but still have a feed of moist air into this area. But your main flow's up here. So you got this over 40 knots of mid-level flow, mid-level jet right in with this region, exit region right in here. So your thunderstorms will definitely get going here. And then you can see where this trough is really digging down to this region, right? So basically the southern flank of this trough where there's still moist air down here, you're still going to get areas of energy that rides through here. So therefore, remember we talked about the southeast has a risk of severe weather today. This is why. Flow at the base, moist air down here. This will get the job done for sure for us for some severe weather. Now, we continue to move into our Tuesday. What's going to drive Tuesday's severe weather threat? Still just a little bit of flow down here in Texas. That's why you got that marginal risk in Texas for tomorrow. And there is flow up here, plenty of it. I think you're just kind of lacking low-level moisture to get more widespread storms. Definitely enough flow to get these storms going. What's your moisture levels at the surface going to be? How high are your dew points, your humidity going to be up here? Okay. You start to move into your Wednesday, bigger severe weather day. Look how more amplified this mid-level jet is. You see right here, perfect example of how we mentioned that the severe weather chances on average begin to shift a little bit further north as we get deeper into the summer months. June is a bigger severe weather month for the high plains in the north central U.S., and that's because your jet really positions a little bit further north. Sometimes you get anomalies or outliers where the jet really digs further south. We got that last year in June down in Georgia and Alabama, but that doesn't happen a lot. But you got plenty of flow riding over this region, and then it kind of jolts down right here. And it's always, guys, it's always at the southern flank of this flow that has the best low-level moisture. Once you get way up here, you get involved in the actual cold front, and just a lot of dry air. It's really typically, right into here. Best low-level moisture feed right into the bottom edge of this mid-level jet. That's where you're really going to get your best opportunity for ingredients for severe weather. So that's really what's driving it, kinematic-wise, for Wednesday. And then we start to get into our Thursday. What happens? Well, this jet begins to dip a little bit further south, still a very zonal look. So your cold front is, probably, somewhere right in here, kind of surging this way. So once again, you got enough flow right in here, and you got a rich, moist feed rising into that flow. So you're going to have an opportunity for severe weather, right into here, most likely. Okay, so yeah, as far as the kinematic ingredients, that's kinematics meaning wind flow aloft. What about your thermodynamics? And we'll just talk about dew points. Well, today, you see how this had this pocket of dew points in like the 60s? That's plenty of moist air riding, with basically what we call the exit region of the mid-level jet right over the northern plains. That'll get the job done for some severe weather. You got plenty of moisture down here. Dew points in the 50s is plenty of moisture for New Mexico as you're a little bit higher up. So just that little bit of flow riding over this deeper moisture down here will get the job done for some showers and storms in Texas. That's why you got the risk of severe weather today. And then look down here this afternoon, this evening, very rich tropical moisture, low country of South Carolina and southeastern Georgia to get those storms really ingesting that very warm, moist air. So that'll definitely get the job done down here for sure with that little bit of flow on top, a lot of flow on top. And then we start to get into our Tuesday afternoon. Remember I mentioned there's enough mid-level flow up here in the upper Midwest, but there's just dew points only in the upper 50s, like around 60, 61, 62. Not a lot of moist air for these storms to really get going as far as severe weather. This could uptrend though, but it's really as we get into Wednesday, we really start to get a rich tropical moist feed of air that rises well north into the upper Midwest. So plenty of moist air to drive any kind of severe weather right into here where you do have that slight risk. Where is it? The slight risk right into here. A lot of moist air rising into that slight risk area. So check that off the box for thermodynamics. Dew points well into the 60s, even some low 70s. Look at this pocket of dry air across the eastern U.S. That's our trough in place. Will allow for some nice mornings for, early to mid-June standards across the south. You can't ask for anything better than this. It really is. The more you can get mornings like this across the south, which I think will have some pleasant lower humidity mornings across the south, the better. You kind of are cutting off those days of summer that you're ultimately going to get, but how many days can you really just prevent from happening, I guess, if that makes any sense. But you get into Thursday afternoon. Look, remember we drew the cold front boundary right into here? Okay, you can see it. Drier air, dew points in the 40s and 50s. Very moist air building into that flow that we just mentioned right here. So flow will be into this region also. Dew points, there'll be definitely a defining boundary somewhere in here Thursday afternoon. Everybody along that boundary and just south will get the thunderstorm development for sure. So yeah, that's what's driving the severe weather event. We give you an update on the tropics. Do we have any new information? I always like to check. We don't. Tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days per the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. So no outlooks. I always want to start this off by showing you guys these outlooks from the experts at the National Hurricane Center. Now, if we look at some model guidance, we'll take a look at Tuesday morning. Tomorrow morning we'll start 24 hours out. And the big thing you'll watch for, guys, is just a lot of greens, even some splashes of yellows, orange right in here. This is our tropical moisture getting just kind of hanging out down here, a trough in place over the eastern U.S. It's kind of forcing this moisture because the flow around this trough is kind of going like this. So it's kind of just forcing this moisture right into here. It's not allowing it to really move far north because the trough is in place, really acting as a steering current for all this moisture. But I'll show you what changes as we get a little bit deeper into the next few days. And just nothing but a ton of moisture for Florida, getting into Thursday, getting into Friday. Do we see any kind of development of any kind of low pressure? There's one kind of hanging out near Central America. I want you to notice this tropical system on the Pacific side of Mexico. got to watch this. If this kind of can drift over Mexico into the Bay of Campeche, the Gulf of Mexico, could it do something? But latest GFS does develop a low right in here. Kind of begins to let up on the rain a little bit for Florida, maybe this weekend. But, I mean, even on the GFS, it still continues to show you guys getting hit. And it takes more of a consolidated area of energy, cruises it across the Gulf of Mexico, and does hit around this time next week the Gulf coastline somewhere, I mean, maybe near Louisiana, Mississippi, as a 1,002 millibar low pressure. So something to watch for. Okay, and this will bring a ton of tropical moisture for the deep south if that was something that happened. Okay, so what does the European do? So we do have the latest Euro. Same thing, we'll start off Tuesday morning, a lot of tropical moisture dancing around over areas of the Gulf of Mexico, the southern peninsula of Florida. Continues Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then we have to watch as we get into Saturday. Do we get something that gets going right here in the Gulf? Saturday morning. It does take some energy. There it is. Just a blob of green. Doesn't look very impressive. And kind of shoves it into Louisiana areas and Mississippi, even Texas. And we got to watch this. And eventually, like as we get into about 8 days out, does take something in the Bay of Campeche and try to get it going. So I think there's a lot of things to watch over the next 10 days as far as tropical activity. Now, chances of a tropical depression forming between now and the next 7 days, the European Ensemble says, hey, there's over a 90% chance of that forming. Between now and, let's say, the next 7 days, between now and this time next Monday about, not as high chance. I mean, this is like, 30 to 40% chance. It really increases the odds as you start to get into the 7 to 10 day range. And I just want to watch any kind of energy that starts off maybe in the Pacific, cruises over Central America or Mexico, gets into the Bay here, and tries to develop something. That happens sometimes, for sure. Nothing super uncommon about that at all. Now, as far as the steering currents, all right, this is 200 millibar flow. So this is, flow in the 35, 40,000 feet up in the air. Okay. If you look really closely, you see these little arrows embedded into these blues and greens here. And you see these arrows, they're kind of pointing this way, right? And then they kind of go off like this. And if you look up here, they're more so going like this and then diving dramatically back up like that. So that's that trough in place. The flow around the trough up here is kind of dipping the flow like this. So, no, I don't want to start a free trial. Appreciate it though. But your tropical moisture is down here. I'll put a well, it's all into here, right? Okay, but if you look at these arrows, right? See these arrows right here? They're kind of doing like this and then like this. So this is really forcing this tropical moisture that's right into here kind of just into Florida. The upper wind pattern does not support all this moisture getting all the way up here for most of the work week. Just really keeps it cruising and forming right over Florida. Now we don't just look at upper wind patterns when we're talking about the steering currents of moisture, especially with moisture that's not really consolidated into a very strong storm system. I will mention typically weaker systems can get pulled more by I would say currents in the lower levels of the atmosphere, flow in the lower levels of the atmosphere. Stronger systems are going to be, more so yanked around by flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, like a stronger hurricane. And it's because these stronger hurricanes have higher cloud tops. They just basically surge higher up in the atmosphere so they can be influenced more by the upper wind pattern. So just because you're seeing this, the moisture is not going to just, for example, over Florida all week, just go west to east. That's why I'm mentioning that. Man, that is an ugly arrow. But anyways, we look at this as the main steering influence. But as we start to make our way into Wednesday, you're still seeing those arrows kind of going more so zonal, west to east. Then we start to get into Thursday, and then we start to get into Friday. Okay, one thing I want you to notice as we are getting into Friday afternoon, notice how you have this like little white area right here, and then the 200 millibar wind flow dips down like this, dramatically goes like this, and then eventually like this. So this is what we call, it's very weak. You can barely see it on the 500 millibar chart. This is an upper trough that digs down to the Gulf of Mexico. This begins to force some of this moisture further north in Florida, eventually trying to get it into South Carolina, Georgia, places like that in the southeast. As we continue to move this, I think that this upper trough begins just to weaken in general. So this is going to probably allow for moisture that's still going to be hanging out down here as we get into net, like this coming Sunday and Monday, to start to rise maybe into this region right in here. Still got some moisture going into the Gulf coastline. And we just have to watch the development of anything that gets going as you have a bit of an anticyclonic flow down here, allowing and aiding for any kind of development. And then all of this begins to kind of move the pattern in general as we get late into next week. Okay, so that's what's pushing the moisture into Florida. It's really keeping it down here in Florida. And if we look at kind of a radar simulation from the Euro on what can unfold, you can really see it well. Watch how all these splotches of greens, yellows, and oranges really just stays in the peninsula of Florida. We'll start off around 5 p.m. this evening, and we'll keep this going. Might have to restart it up here. Yeah. And if you're confused about the time frame, look up here, Monday, 11 p.m. Eastern time. That's today. But, I mean, we get into Tuesday, and just keep your eyes down here. Watch how just rounds of heavy downpours continues. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, Friday night, Saturday, still getting it. And then, you know, we start to get into Sunday. Maybe this begins to chill out a little bit. And remember how I told you all this rain isn't necessarily going to move like west to east? Like, look, this is kind of just popping up and dancing around everywhere. In the low levels of the atmosphere, the flow could be different. Direction could be different than the upper levels of the atmosphere. So just remember that. And we'll talk that. We talk heavily on that in hurricane season, which we are. We're in hurricane season. But when it comes to actually tracking a stronger end tropical storm, hurricane, man, we get detailed on that. It can get confusing too, but we'll try to explain it when you guys can understand. So let's look at this. This is between now and Saturday morning. Rainfall between, like I said, now and Saturday morning. Guys, Fort Myers going for 15 to 20 inches of rain, but you see the splotches of purple right down here? That's rainfall that could exceed over 15 inches of rain. You notice how it dramatically cuts off, though, as you get like up towards Orlando. I mean, 3 to 4 inches of rain is a good bit of rain, but not near as much as your friends down here in the southern tip of Florida. You know, Miami could get over 10 inches of rain. Tampa Bay, maybe 6, 7 inches of rain. I know there's areas on the west coast and western sections of Florida, maybe other areas of Florida too. I'll be honest, I haven't checked the drought monitor in some time. I probably need to look at it. But just has not had a lot of rain lately. Southwestern Florida, though, a ton of rain coming up. And a little bit better of a graphic, probably still a little bit small on your screen. I need to start pulling these up like I do for the snow. Some of these links are very hard to find, though. Fort Myers, between now, Saturday morning, 15 to 20 inches of rain. Sarasota, 8 to 10. Tampa, 4 to 6. Orlando, 4 to 6. Melbourne, 4 to 6. Vero Beach, 6 to 8. West Palm Beach, 8 to 10. And I know it's kind of cut off for Miami, but they're going for around 8 to 10 inches of rain. So, man, a lot of rain coming for you guys. That's all I got. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all. Y'all have a wonderful start to your work week.